What up? What up? What up? We're back at it again. Season 2, episode 1. We got a special edition today. Combination of college hoops coast to coast and college basketball heat check. We got Kevin Sweeney. We got Eli B. We're ready to go. What up, fellas?
How's it going, man?
How we doing? The only problem with this show right now is the fact that you are not in Las Vegas, Nevada with us. Because if you were, you could be balling out. We could be having a blast. We could do this thing in person, but you had to stick at home. What are we doing?
There's levels to this. I'm not on that level yet. You guys are on that level.
Hey, you did some traveling yourself, though. So you've been hitting the road, too. We like it.
I did. Just got back from Charleston for the first Rising Coaches Classic. That was a big success.
MTE season, baby. Love to see
it. Yeah. MTE. So you guys are both in Vegas. How's Vegas treating you so far?
Kev, you go ahead. Your stay's ending before mine is.
My stay ends overnight tonight. It's been fun. I've enjoyed my time. It's my first time as an adult. It's even more ridiculous a place than I kind of remembered. Just there's so many preposterous things about walking through the city where you're like, what the hell am I doing right now? But no, it's been great. I mean, lots of great basketball. Obviously, Gonzaga, UCLA, the headliner, but the Maui games have been a lot of fun. I mean, Houston. We'll talk about Houston, Wisconsin as we go, but that game was incredible. I'll say this: any game where a team is chasing 20 at halftime and is slowly chipping away the whole second half is my favorite game to watch in college basketball, because the tension is just unreal. And so we've had some games like that. We've had some super close games. So all you could ask for from my first trip to Vegas as an adult. So no complaints from me.
I love it. We won't ask about the extracurricular parts of it yet. We'll ask about that later. Eli, how's your trip been?
It's been good. I got in last night, 3:30 a.m. wake up, so I could get in time for the first game. I'll be here till Friday, hopefully also checking out some of the Las Vegas Invitational Classic games that are at Orleans. Some good major teams over there, but it's been good. First Maui experience as a heat check credentialed writer, which has been really fun, and being able to meet some folks and see Kevin in person for the first time, and see some other guys. So it's been a really good experience, and there have been slow-paced games, low-scoring games, but like what Kevin said, it's been fun to see some of these matchups where the higher-seeded team is down big and have to claw back, and just a lot of really good fights. And I think today's matchup between St. Mary's and Wisconsin should be it might not be what everyone wanted or expected, but I still think it'll be a really good, high-quality basketball game, so I'm looking forward to it.
No doubt. Let's talk about the crown jewel of college basketball season so far, which is Dickie V coming back for number 1 versus number 2. Wasn't probably as entertaining as people thought. I'll take the Kevin Sweeney line before I pass it to you guys and say, if Baylor and Gonzaga and everyone else was the theme last season, it does seem like Gonzaga and everyone else this season. What did you guys take from the game? I'll let Eli go first.
Yeah, I mean, Gonzaga is just ridiculously good, and they're so deep, and there are just so many elements to this team. And I think particularly the added dimension of Chet Holmgren into this lineup, it just makes it so challenging to defend Gonzaga overall, because you know what you're going to get out of Drew Timme, and he's a machine himself. But I think the added element of Holmgren, who's 7 feet tall and still plays like a guard, and also the added development of Andrew Nembhard has been extremely impressive to go from where he was at to be plugged into the Gonzaga lineup last year and have been productive in that role. And now there's legitimate talk about him being possibly one of the best guards, if not the best guard in the nation. And that says a lot about his development and also what the Gonzaga staff has been able to do, because it's pretty simple. They've had to have guys step up if they want to be a national title contender this year because of how much they lost in the offseason. And I think how they performed against Texas and how they performed last night against UCLA, it's just added confirmation that they're still that good, and it's probably just a matter of time before this team wins the national title.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think first and foremost, they have now played 2 games against super high-level competition. I would argue Texas is the most talented team in college basketball, and I would argue that UCLA is the most experienced team among the elite tier in college basketball. So the fact that Gonzaga has played those 2 games and never even had to break a sweat, really, with a lead. I mean, they have blown the doors off those teams in the first 10 minutes and then just coasted to the finish line. There was no point yesterday where UCLA felt like they had any chance of winning that game. That's unbelievably impressive. And I think, I thought yesterday's game was a really good kind of encapsulation of what makes Gonzaga special program-wise, right? Like you think about Timmy had 37 points against Texas. He unbelievable performance. He was dominant. No one could stop him. He's the national player of the year, whatever. He comes out against UCLA, and he's quiet. And he had 6 points on 1 for 5 shooting in the first half. He's kind of blended into that game. He was perfectly happy to just be a decoy, let the UCLA defense focus on him, and let Chet and Andrew Nembhard go ball. This team is the consummate team because they are all willing to sacrifice to win. And Drew Timme said it in postgame, like that's all they care about. That nobody cares about numbers, and like they have 2 5-star freshmen coming off the bench. Or I guess Hickman might be a 4-star, but what team in college basketball has kids bought in enough to bring your top 10 recruit Hunter Salas off the bench and him be perfectly happy? He took 1 shot in that game. 1 shot. Like, perfectly happy. Chet Holmgren had 2 points on 1 of 3 shooting against Texas. He was perfectly happy because these dudes are just bought in to win, and that's why they're on another level right now. They're the best point guard in the country in Nembhard. I'll be stronger than you, Eli. I'm 100% on the take. Me and Borzello.
I knew you would be.
And I think they have the best player in the country in Timme, the best point guard in the country in Nembhard, and they might just have the best freshman in the country in Chet. I think obviously Paolo is Paolo and does more, I think, on a daily basis because you're going to run stuff for him. But Chet's ability to impact the game, like we saw yesterday, was just next level. So I'm all in on the Zags. They're the clear number 1 team in the country, and just a matter of time before they cut down the nets.
What's the is there anyone else in this category, or is it Eli, as Kevin said, is it Gonzaga and everybody else?
Well, I mean, I think from probably an odds perspective, I think Gonzaga is still going to be the odds-on favorite to win the national title. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. I just think how this roster is set up, they're going to have the best setup entering the NCAA tournament. They're going to have the best odds, and with already 2 top 5 wins on its resume, Gonzaga is already set to receive the top seed in March. But I think the broader perspective here is just, what is it going to look like when they do have an off night? And Kevin kind of alluded to it too, how they can have, I mean, Chet Holmgren can be quiet, but then Drew Timme might pop off. And then if Drew Timme's quiet, then maybe Andrew Nembhard has a huge game, and Hunter Salas, Julian Strother, like the list goes on and on. So I think they're going to be favored in every game the rest of the way. And I think that was even the case entering the season. But I always kind of hesitate to believe that a team is on its own tier, just given the way that college basketball is constructed. And there are some very, very good teams out there. We've seen Purdue and what they've done this season. And I think they follow a similar theme in that buy-in, because they have an All-American player in Trevion Williams who's coming off the bench and has given up his role as a starter to come off the bench because it's a sacrifice that makes Purdue better. I think those are the types of teams in a season like this where there is so much returning talent. Guys are going to have to fit into roles that they might not necessarily like, and might have to give up opportunities to be the number 2 scorer to instead be the 6th man, or try to fit into these different roles because it helps the team win. So I still think Gonzaga is going to be the favorite. That's not going to change, but I still think there are teams out there like Purdue. I'm still impressed by how Villanova has looked despite 2 losses. UCLA is still in that mix. Texas is just going to get better the way the season goes along. But I think it all comes down to that buy-in and players being able to sacrifice their roles.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I'll say is, one of the main, like the 2 main weaknesses, I think, if you think space at a high level, because Timme is not as mobile on the perimeter. And that was what really killed them in the Baylor game, right? If you think back to that game, was that they spread you out with elite spacing, played 1-5 pick and roll, and dove to the rim with Chama Chachu and Tamba, and let the guards break Timme over and over, and they did, and they ran him off the floor. That was one weakness. The other weakness was not having a rim protector. They didn't have a guy who come over and block shots and change the game defensively. Well, Drew Timme's moving his feet all of a sudden. I mean, he is a much improved defender. He's not, look, he's not going to be a switch big in the NBA. He's not Keegan Murray at Iowa. He's not one of these guys going to be running around guarding point guards all the time. But he is very much improved in that area. And obviously Holmgren provides him a different dimension. So when you're looking at like a realistic roadmap to beating Gonzaga, I think it starts with Gonzaga beating themselves more than it does a team having a matchup, right? Someone can say, oh well, Zach Edey will pound Chet Holmgren and put him in half because Chet Holmgren is like half the size of Zach Edey. Okay, well maybe they will. Like maybe Purdue will get a bunch of post points, but Gonzaga will then really destroy Edey on the other end because they'll run the same screen interaction that Villanova did that destroyed Purdue and bought in for the first 30 minutes of that game, right? Like Gonzaga is so poised. Like there's never a moment where they're going to get rattled. It just doesn't feel like it right now. And so I guess it didn't feel like it last year until Baylor did it, but I don't think there's a team out there with Baylor's talent level. Like Baylor last year was a truly special college basketball team, and they got overlooked throughout the regular season because of how great Gonzaga was too. And but I think we all acknowledged it at that time, like, okay, this team is special. Like this team is loaded. This team is experienced. This team has all those pieces. Right now, I don't think there's a team that matches up to that Baylor team. So yes, could a team beat Gonzaga at some point? Yeah, I mean it's college basketball. Shit happens, right? Like that's the inevitability of this. But there is no team that I would consider like within 3 points of Gonzaga on a neutral court right now.
Yeah, I think the part that sticks out the most to me as we close on Gonzaga UCLA is the Chet Holmgren factor defensively more so than offensively. Defensively, he's so quick with his feet, being able to switch on ball screens. I mean, he feels like he's 10 feet away, and then he can contest the jumper and block it, all of a sudden because of his length. I mean, then at the rim, it just changed everything last night. I felt like earlier on when he blocked a couple shots early in the game, it just makes people feel like, well, now we got to shoot jumpers all game because he's down there. And even when he's not right at the rim, he's so fast twitch with his feet that he can cover ground so fast. And it's not like Drew Timme is not a good defender in the paint either. So with their guard quickness along with Chet Holmgren, it makes them defensively. It reminds you of Baylor in a different way of how dominant they are defensively right now. And they're a really good offensive team. So they remind me a lot of last year's Baylor team, to be honest, even though they do it in a different way with their defensive attack. Let's talk about Maui Invitational. You guys are both there. Obviously, Maui's now in it is in Vegas, which is not necessarily Maui. But tell us about how the event has been so far. Like obviously Houston, Wisconsin was a big game, but tell us about some of the games. And Eli, you go first. Kevin, you go second.
Yeah, we entered this knowing that it was going to be a pretty rock fight, sort of defensive, slow-paced style tournament. I think it was Jim Root from Freeman Weave who shared a stat of all of the teams' tempo ranks heading into this tournament, and almost every single team was sub 300 in the pace that they play. So I think we kind of expected this was going to be a defensive-heavy tournament, and that's been the case so far. The first 3 games yesterday, there was one team that didn't eclipse 23 points, and Oregon had 15 at the half yesterday against St. Mary's. I think Butler had 23. Houston was stuck at 20 in a 40-20 deficit. So that's been the case so far, at least through yesterday's games, and I expect that to be the case again today. But I think after yesterday, I come away most impressed with how St. Mary's played. I didn't really give them a whole lot of hype entering this tournament. I didn't necessarily love the way that they matched up against some of these teams, but they really took Oregon out of the game. And it was an off-shooting night for the Ducks, but I think a lot of credit has to go to the Gales with just how they defended. And they just completely disrupted the Oregon defense. And Oregon has plenty of size and athleticism, but I just thought St. Mary's was so meticulous with how they were on the defensive side. And even though they are a slow-paced team, and that's what they always have been under Randy Bennett, the way that they created turnovers or forced bad looks, grabbed the rebound, and then they hustled down the floor to settle into their offense, I thought was a really interesting look because it kind of took Oregon out of their rhythm. And Logan Johnson was tremendous the way that he performed yesterday. I think that they have the capability of being another one of these WCC teams that we've seen out of the gates perform to an extremely high level. And I think with yesterday's St. Mary's controlling against Oregon, Gonzaga blowing UCLA out of the water, it's been it's been a very, very good couple of weeks for the WCC, and
Yes.
if St. Mary's wins again today, they're very well positioned to lock at least 3 bids into this NCAA tournament with the way they've performed in non-conference.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'll echo a lot of the St. Mary's stuff. I think they've done a tremendous job. I think when you're watching teams this time of year in particular, the one of the most valuable things you can have is an identity. And right now, St. Mary's is a clear identity. They have guys who are 100% bought into what they want to do, and when you have everyone in lockstep, it works wonders. Like it is so important. I'm sure B can tell anyone about that as a coach, like especially in the year, like when teams are figuring out who they are, especially this year with so many transfers, so many guys in new roles. Like I think you've heard pretty much every coach come up to the day's post game and just be like, yeah, like we don't know who we are yet. Like Mike Bryce, and they're like, yeah, like we're still figuring out who our guys are. And, like everyone's working out rotations. Butler has been bad in this tournament. And a lot of it's like you can watch Laval Jordan substitute right now, and he just does not know which guys to play off his bench. Like It is very obvious that he is just, all right, let's try this, see if it works. Like there's not a lot of confidence in his bench right now. Right. And I think when you're a team like St. Mary's, and you have that confidence in where you are, it works wonders. I think Wisconsin as well is a great example of this. Like they came in, I was questioning the talent level. They had lost at home to Providence. I was like, okay, is this team an NCAA tournament team? I wasn't really sure, and they've been very impressive so far. Again, a team that has played 100% with an identity, and that's been, we're going to grind out the game. We're going to share the ball at a high level on offense, and let our star and Johnny Davis cook. And Johnny Davis had 30 yesterday. He was incredible in that win. He's cementing himself as a potential first-round draft pick in the coming NBA draft, which is probably bad news for Wisconsin long-term. But in the short term, you try to win Maui because right now they look quite good. So really impressed with the Badgers and the job that Greg Gard has done with a new group, with a lot of younger guys kind of working into the mix. Stephen Crowell up front has been outstanding. So yeah, it's great. The Maui title game is kind of what we expected the third place game to be, and the third place game is kind of what we expected the title game to be, which I almost kind of think is better if you think about it, because we still get that third place game. Like Oregon Houston is a great game on its own. Like that's a fantastic matchup between two talented teams and two very good coaches, and there will be desperation and an urgency to win that game because coming off a loss, like you want to win it and you want a resume game. Like you still get that game. It's not like we miss out on it, but we also get a Wisconsin St. Mary's game that would have been fun on paper. Now with the stakes of like you get to get a at the end, right? Like that's fantastic. So I'm excited about the day at Maui. We're heading over in about an hour actually to go watch the first game. So I gotta pack up my shit. So that'll be good. But it's been great. It's been a fun one. Really big shout out to the Maui event staff. They've done a fantastic job putting on a great event. Again, they moved it late. They had to figure everything out. The arena is fantastic. The set up for media folks is fantastic. The coaches have been super pleased with how everything has been run. So it's been a very, very, very well run event, and that's all you can ask for. So
yeah, those things aren't as easy to run as people think. Now that I actually have a little experience doing it, let's talk.
It's no Uprise MT, but it's not bad.
I appreciate that. Appreciate the shout out. Yeah, let's talk mid-major love. Let's talk some mid-majors across the country. Obviously, we talked a little bit about WCC. Santa Clara is a team we have not mentioned. San Fran is also playing really high level, BYU. And then you go kind of the other part of the world, mid-majors, St. Bonnie's, Memphis, Colorado State. Kind of touch on any one of those that you'd like to talk about, those mid-major teams that are sticking out so far.
Yeah, I'll start with Colorado State in your neck of the woods. And I think CSU came into the season with pretty high expectations, and it was tough to see where they fell in just alignment with those expectations, because I think it was a lot of relying upon this team to be extremely good offensively. I think it slipped a little bit last year because they were almost more of a defensive team last year, which is still kind of odd to think when you have guys like David Roddy and Isaiah Stevens leading the show that you're going to be so good defensively, but they've been tremendous on the offensive end. David Roddy has been an absolute stud, putting up 27, 28 a night. And I think the way that they performed against Northeastern, they were down, I believe, 44-24 and went on a 35-6 run or something like that. That obviously you don't want to go down 20 to a team like Northeastern because those are the types of losses that can really impact your at-large candidacy. But the fact that they battled back and were able to lock in, that's the types of things that I look for in these types of mid-major teams, and knowing that even when their backs are against the wall, that they're able to step up, lock in defensively, and put points on the board. And they blew out Oral Roberts on opening night and win against Creighton. So it's been an impressive start for CSU. And I think even if we want to stay in the Mountain West, I think Utah State has been a particularly impressive. And the UC Davis loss hurts, but the way that Justin Bean has performed, and I don't really know if you just look by the book, if there's been a more productive player in college basketball this season than Justin Bean, who is a former walk-on from pretty much the middle of nowhere. And the fact that he's stuck around despite the coaching change and Ryan Odom has plugged him in and known how to use him. He's extended his range. I think he had maybe 12 three-pointers in his career. I think he already has 9 and is shooting, 60% from deep this season, when he was doing the exact opposite of that his first 3 seasons. So I'm interested to see what the supporting cast does around him once competition kind of ramps up, and Mountain West play is going to be especially tough. But I think the Mountain West has to be pretty confident with how they've looked, and SDSU will get things figured out. But it's been a good showing so far for Utah State and Colorado State.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I'll add with Colorado State before I mention some of the teams I wanted to get to is a lot of people think about that team as like, oh, it's Stevens and Roddy, and those 2 guys are special, and that's it, right? Like they won their opener because John Tonje had 31 points, right? Like they have Chandler Jacobs has come in and given them a lot. The D2 kid from Dallas Baptist, I believe. And, once Kendall Moore is back, he'll be an impactful guy. Like he's been banged up, right? Like this team is more than those 2 dudes, but those 2 dudes are pretty darn good. So it's not a bad place to start. I'll shout out to Loyola. I think Loyola, year 1 for Drew Valentine. Obviously, the competition level hasn't been super high. They're playing their first huge test of the year right now, Michigan State, and they're playing quite a battle. I have it on my phone right now as I speak. It's 41-40 Michigan State with 11 minutes to go. It's been a really well played game, but I just think like it's so obvious when you watch them that like Drew Valentine has such a pulse on what they need to do to be successful, and their guys are just as bought in as to him as they were to Porter. Like they're again old and talented, and now they're doing a lot of different stuff, right? Like I think a lot of people were like, oh yeah, like they'll just Drew Valentine is going to try to be Porter Moser 2.0. And I think the best thing you said about Drew Valentine is trying to be Drew Valentine 1.0. Yep. Right? They are way different on offense. They're taking a ton of threes. They're playing faster. Like they are not like grinding out the tempo into the final 10 seconds and then running like split action off of Krutwig at the high post, right? It's just way different. Like and it's working, right? Like again, they're right now in a game with Michigan State and led at halftime and have honestly looked like the better team in this game. So I just think they deserve a lot of credit. I think if they win this game, they'll certainly get the buzz, but they get 3 opportunities in Battle for Atlantis this week, and what a great opportunity for that program. I think these MTs really give incredible opportunities for a lot of these mids, right? Like St. Clair beating TCU is a type of thing that moves the needle. St. Mary's beating Oregon moves the needle significantly, and certainly, if they could win Maui would be another feather in their cap, right? You got Utah State, you mentioned Eli, that they want a tough MT with really good programs in it, right? Like when you want to prove to the college basketball world that you're legit, a great way to do it is to go win a tournament and go beat the high major teams in that tournament. Like, hey, look, we were the best team out there, and a lot of these mid majors have done that. So it's been fun to watch, and certainly looking forward to a lot more of those teams getting in action. San Francisco is in Vegas. I think Eli would see them tomorrow, and their tournament's not quite as high level, but I think they're going to have to play UAB. UAB's a really good mid-major team, so
very good.
Works out really well. So been fun to watch these groups. I think there's a lot of them this year, a lot of older teams, and old tends to win in college basketball. It's not rocket science that when you have 23 and 24-year-old dudes, you tend to beat the 19 and 20-year-olds.
Yeah, let's talk 2 more mid-majors before we go. One old, one young. Memphis is very young. St. Bonnie's is old. They have most of their returners. How do those 2 teams fit in the mid-major landscape? I know Memphis is still kind of in that top 10. I think they're playing Virginia Tech, one of the 2. How do those 2 teams look as far as mid-majors go, you guys think?
I can take Memphis. I think I've been impressed for the most part with the job that Penny has done I think Amani Bates has looked really, really bought in and is not. I think there was some questions like, well, what is his identity in college basketball? Is he just going to come in and force up shots and make a bunch of 18-footers? And so far, he hasn't really done that. I will say that the game they played against Western Kentucky, they really regressed to a lot of the things that they did last season, not very well, of really sloppy 1-on-5 basketball, turnover, and just kind of overwhelmed with their talent. Use their talent on the game, but would not have won that game if they were not, Memphis, right? And as they play harder teams, like they play Virginia Tech tonight, I guarantee you, if they turn the ball over 25 times like they did against West Kentucky, they are not going to beat a Mike Young coach Virginia Tech team. That just will not happen. So they have some things to clean up, but I thought the first few games were a good sign. Duran's been playing really well, and obviously the talent is next level.
Yeah, I think for St. Bonaventure, I've seen the Bonnies probably as much as any team so far this season, just because I was especially interested in what this group would look like after what they did last season and bringing everyone back, all 5 starters back, so much experience on this roster. And it's been interesting to look at this team because they've trailed at halftime, I think, in all but their opener against Siena. So they've already been tested quite a bit. But I like how, even though this team is defensive rooted and they were a top 20 defensive team last season, I think their scoring pop is especially impressive. And the game against Clemson, that's already probably one of the top 5, top 10 games so far this season, just with the excitement and how well these Bonnies fans traveled down to Charleston. That was ridiculous in its own right. But I think the scoring pop that they were able to get, particularly from Kyle Lofton, he got hot and hit, I think, 4 threes in about a 7-8 possession stretch, to go from down double digits, which they've done at least 3 or 4 times already this season, and be able to get the stops and have that quick scoring punch, I think is a huge deal, because it is something that they lacked last season. And even though the contributors are still the same, I think the fact that they're able to just hit teams with a quick 8-0, 9-0 run and still be able to lock up defensively, that's what gives me hope, because I wasn't as in on St. Bonaventure as some others entering the season, because I didn't know if they had that extra gear offensively. And they've dug out of some big deficits so far, avoided some damaging losses, and still undefeated. It's been impressive to see what they've done. And they still have Oshunini locked up, in terms of he's still a little bit banged up, and we haven't seen quite what this team will look like when they're fully healthy. But have to imagine, with the way that the A-10's been a little disappointing, they should be able to wind up on Selection Sunday with a pretty gaudy record, I'd imagine.
Yeah, we'll close and get our final 5 minutes. There's been a lot of different themes of this season, from the transfer portal, how it's going to impact the extra year of eligibility, the Blue Bloods being back. What's one thing you'd say that stood out to you so far, Kevin and Eli both? We'll go Kevin first.
Muted. I think the one thing I will say is that you hear a lot of people saying, "Oh, well, we're still figuring things out. We're still finding our identity." But what I see across the landscape is deeper, more talented teams. And I think, that's certainly, I think, the case at a lot of high majors, but also mid-majors quite as well, because you have a lot of teams with a lot of these COVID year guys, right? Mark Few was joking about it yesterday in his presser. The WCC is loaded with these 5th-year dudes, and they were the only one that didn't have them because, as Mark put it, no one wants to stay with me for 6 years, which I think the guys going to the NBA, but Mark certainly has a good sense of humor. So, I think, the reason we're seeing some of these special teams starting to get going early is, when you look around the WCC, for instance, you've got 5th-year Jamari Bouye and 5th-year Eli Scott and 5th-year Tommy Kuzi and 5th-year Joseph Frankich, right? That's a pretty good place to start. So, I think the 5th-year guys and that combined with the portal has given teams the ability to be deeper and more athletic and older, and that's going to be if the basketball is good right now in November, it's going to be a lot better in March. So, really excited about that.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick on that one, Eli. I think the basketball is better sooner for a lot of programs because of returners like Colorado State. You have your full team back, then you add a couple pieces. Now guys can take the next step. And then you have some of those teams, like you said, Notre Dame, even Oregon, who's really talented, who picked up a lot of guys from the portal, who's still kind of figuring things out. So it also adds this element of excitement as the season goes on, because we all know most of these guys can really coach, and these players really want to be successful. So it's only going to get better as it goes. The scary part is I don't see Gonzaga getting any worse, but we've already talked enough Gonzaga. Go ahead, Eli. What do you got?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a combination of some of the things we've talked about. I think the experience factor is so big in college basketball this season, and in more of a normal season with fans in the stands is going to be a huge deal for a lot of these teams protecting home and teams trying to steal victories on the road. That's a theme that's going to be continuing as the season goes along. But I just think, at least in context of what this week looks like and the next handful of weeks, is there are a lot of quality mid-major teams in that maybe 50 to 60 to 70 range nationally that have big opportunities right now while they're experienced and while some of these high major teams are figuring things out with all of their portal additions and freshman additions, that if you are a program like, say, Loyola Chicago or St. Mary's, and you have a legitimate case for an at-large, if you're able to sneak out a win right now against Michigan State, against Wisconsin, against some of these high majors that are still figuring it out, then you're in a pretty good spot to pick up a seed come March. And so I think a lot of people look at the season in context of, okay, we still have 3.5 months until the brackets are set. But for a lot of these teams, the opportunity is right now. And like St. Mary's to win 3 games in Maui, and to be able to lock that up and get their tournament in tournament candidacy in a good spot, that's a really, really big deal. And they have experienced leg up, as do a lot of these mid majors. And the time is now for a lot of these teams to make their mark to set things up as they enter conference play.
All right, final thoughts, Kevin. Anything that you're looking forward to most this season? Eli will go next, and then we'll close the shop and let you guys get to the games.
My final thought is that it is incredibly fun to watch Kelvin Sampson coach and hear Kelvin Sampson coach. I was sitting behind his bench for their win against Butler, and at one point they were winning 31-13. He turned to his assistant coaches and said, "Why can't we do anything right?" And I thought that was a pretty good encapsulation of who Kelvin Sampson is. So,
amen.
Yeah, I love watching them. I think I'm excited to watch them today. I'm excited to watch them. I think it's just great to see a lot of the great personalities in the game kind of back close up, and so looking forward to seeing that all year long.
Yeah, it's been fun to be out here, because last year with everything that was shut down, it was tough to get into a lot of these media spaces and get credentialed for games. But I think leaving the St. Mary's Oregon game yesterday, I just had this rush when I was leaving to the presser. It's like, man, we're back, and it just feels like more of a sense of normalcy, and much of the conversations now are about the games itself and just about getting better, as opposed to, is our next game going to be canceled? Right. Are we going to have to make up games? Things like that. And that was the case last year, and for plenty of good reason. That was just the case with the nation, what things were going on. But it feels like the conversation now is more so about the games and about college basketball and just winning. And it's really fun for us to be able to experience that and see it up close and personal. And as Kevin said, listening to Sampson yesterday and Kellen Sampson on the bench, and it's the things that we certainly don't take for granted. It's fun to be up close and personal and see this live. So it's been a great experience.
And I think there were a few things that Kelvin Sampson said that would not be appropriate for this.
No, absolutely not.
I can't imagine that. Well, everyone, thanks for tuning in. We'll have Heat Check coming back to you soon next Thursday. We'll have College Hoops Coast to Coast on Tuesdays. Get this thing rocking. Glad to kick it off, fellas. Enjoy Maui in Vegas.
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, Ed.